Hello, this is Christopher Busby. This is the Criminalised Nuclear War Systems Conference in Riga, and this is a short addition that I want to make to my earlier talk about the health effects of low-level radiation and the court case in London, which we hope will put paid to the possible use of nuclear weapons. But this is more about an existential threat that exists at the moment, which has followed the British, the Brexit, the British desire through referendum to leave the European Union. Now, I personally voted.
Tissel.
Oh yes. Well, do you want to start again then?
No. just turn around and sow the thistle.
Well, one of the consequences of that, and it has to do with these thistles at the top here. The thistle is the emblem of Scotland, and of course, if you look at the variation in the voting patterns across the United Kingdom, what you find is that the Scottish people wanted to remain very strongly wanted to remain in the European Union, and since they have their own parliament now, they could actually, were it to come, well, when it comes about that the British pull out, it will be the fragmentation of the United Kingdom, because the Scots will then vote to go back and become a nation inside Europe, a small nation inside Europe, which will have various problems for the immigration people, because they'll have to build Hadrian's Wall again across England and Scotland. And of course that also leads to the possibility that Cornwall or any small area of England might say, well, hey, we don't want to be part of England and the United Kingdom anymore. We want to go and join up in the EU. Now, I actually voted for Remain. And although I think there are all sorts of very serious things wrong with Europe, my concern was this, and it's the concern I'm going to hand to you now, is that if the European Union collapses, if it fragments, and there are lots of reasons why it might do, then what it will do is it will create a power vacuum, and that power vacuum can be exploited by people who want to, if you like, take over the world. Because there is no doubt that as we move forward through time, and in my lifetime now I've seen this movement forward, we get an increasing amount of competition for resources, for oil, for energy, for minerals, and this competition is one that can only go in one direction if somebody can't stop it. It goes in the direction of war. And the problem with that is that whereas in the war that we saw in the past, in the Second World War, the First World War, and wars before that, we saw lots of people killing lots of people. In the next war, because of the existence on Earth of two major nuclear-armed countries, or mega countries we might call them, Russia and the United States, there could well be a nuclear exchange. And this nuclear exchange might be limited, or it might be total. But even if it were limited, and this is the message I want to give to you today, even if it were limited, we know from the effects that these nuclear tests had on the veterans who were exposed to the fallout, that the results in terms of congenital malformation of children, the damage to the human genome and to the genome of all the species on Earth will be terminal. And so this is why we cannot possibly allow this to happen. Now the problem is that the generals imagine that they can win wars with nuclear weapons. For some reason they seem to imagine that a nuclear weapon is somehow like an ordinary bomb, but bigger. They don't realise that it's not just a bigger bang that creates more damage, that wipes out more people. It's actually something that produces a silent and invisible killer, something that's introduced into the environment of the Earth that contaminates huge areas of the ground, with the result that anybody who lives there or anybody who's inhaled the air after these explosions will be infertile, or if they have children, the children will be infertile, or they will be genetically damaged. And this is my message to the planet, especially since as I came here to Latvia today, I saw a book that was published, I think, last week, very recently anyway, since it was around about the time of the referendum, by General Sir Richard Shirreff, and it's called War with Russia, an urgent warning from the senior military command. And it says, to my friends in Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania, men and women who understand the price of freedom. Well, I think that's what we've been talking about, isn't it? However, this man is the former Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Europe. So we are not talking about some guy. We're talking about the head of NATO. We're talking about the top man. And he's written a book called 2017 War with Russia. Now, this book is written from the perspective of a military macho hero. The sort of thing that lots of men try to pretend they are, or want to be. And this goes back to my argument before when I said that I was a general in the service of the whole nature. That I think this is essentially a war between men who think they're strong and powerful and fantastically good in some unelaborated way. And they want to show that they're bigger and stronger than the same men who are the generals on the other side, and in this case in Russia. So this book is all about evil President Putin and how he's going to take over the world in some Stalinist way. He wants to extend the coverage of Mother Russia by scooping up countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union, like Ukraine, and obviously after Ukraine, he's talking about the Baltic states, and particularly he's talking about Latvia, because Latvia was a Russian military base. It was the Russian military base. This was where all the short-range nuclear missiles were, it's where the intercontinental ballistic missiles were. It was at Skrunda where they sighted the early warning system. It was totally militarized, and the people who live here in Latvia know that because of all the Russians who are still here, who didn't go back when the wall came down and the Russians went and the Soviets went back to Russia. So there are lots and lots of Russian people here. And this has caused some sort of nationalist tension, which is going to be exploited by these people. But the funny thing is that they are saying that it's the Latvians who are frightened of the Russians invading. So in other words, they say that the Russians are building up forces on the eastern borders of the Baltic states. And so what they want to do is to fly in enormous amounts of men, arms, material, missiles, helicopters, big air C-41 transports, the F-16 jets and so on. They say to prevent the Russians marching in to Latvia. And that's what this book is about. This book is about, in his scenario, this man's scenario, and this is written exactly, and he's again and again and again, it bursts out at every page that he wants governments of Europe to invest more money into NATO. He says that NATO is becoming emasculated, it hasn't got enough weaponry, it hasn't got enough armour, and so, it's inviting an invasion from evil President Putin. And he says here, somewhere, let's see if I can find it. Yes. This is, I read this. The President and his advisors in the Kremlin have watched and noted this ever-growing Western malaise. Despite warnings from the now very worried Baltic states, NATO has failed to even recognise that Maskirovka and undercover operations are being actively used by those member states, against those member states by the Russians. The Baltic states are the next obvious targets, and it is only too obvious to them what is going on. The President and his advisors have watched and noted this malaise, and the scene is set for the President to complete his strategic intent to reunite ethnic Russian speakers in the former states of the Soviet Union under the banner of Mother Russia. So this is what NATO is peddling. This nonsense is what NATO is peddling to the heads of governments in Europe, to ask them to give NATO a carte blanche to march into Latvia and to militarise the eastern border of the Baltic states. Now the problem with that is this, that the Russians have in Kaliningrad they have hundreds of medium-range ballistic missiles that are capable of targeting any of the major capitals in Europe. London, Prague, Berlin, Hamburg, Paris could be wiped out by one of these missiles. These missiles are infinitely more powerful than the bomb that was exploded over Hiroshima, and you can see what happened there. And these things are hundreds of times more powerful than that. And so one of these explosions would wipe out a whole city. So we're in a position now where people like this, General Sir Richard Sheriff, are arguing for an increased presence of NATO forces opposite the Russian forces, who they say are building up on the borders of the Baltic states. Now, of course, the Russians are saying, look, and Putin has said often, he said, we are being encircled. We are being encircled. That, in fact, you know, Russia is the borders of Russia, which originally had Europe as a kind of buffer, and certainly the Baltic states, when they went into Europe as a sort of buffer, are now being invested with enormous amounts of military potential on our borders. Now, of course, if you were to take this over to the United States in 1963, I was still around then, and we thought we were all going to get blown to pieces, because the Soviet Union sighted missiles in Cuba. But if you were to make the analogy with what's happening now, it would be that the NATO forces would, or at least it would be like the Russian forces, would be sighting missiles and material on the border between Mexico and the United States. So it's a provocation. Now the problem is this. The problem is that in Latvia you have, well anyway, I'll come to that later, but the first thing I want to say here is I want to talk about the sorts of people that these people are, these generals. And I'm going to read from a little bit here where he's talking about the head of the American security operation. He's like the top man. So we've got this guy's the top man in Europe. We're now talking about the top man in the United States, and he's describing it. His name is Abe McWhite. Of course, it's not his real name, but we assume that this man is based on some real person that this guy knows. And this is the point about this is somebody that he admires. We need to get into the mindset of these generals to understand what it is they admire. Well, this is what he admires. General Abe McWhite walked into the outer office where he was sitting. A 4-star general and commander-in-chief, Special Operations Command, before retiring from active military duty, and in his younger days a feared Delta Force operative, McWhite was well over 6 feet tall, as rangy as a Wyoming cowboy. He braced himself to attention as the man described by the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, as perhaps the finest warrior and leader of men in combat I have ever met. He nodded a good morning, but said nothing. He knew the man would have already run 10 miles before dawn and would eat but one vegan meal later in the day. All right? Okay? So what do we think about someone like that? I think nutcase. I think anyone who runs 8 miles before breakfast and eats one vegan meal a day ought to be in a psychiatric institute. But no, he's the main admired man of General Sir Richard, whatever his bloody name is, Sheriff here, former Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Europe. So these are the people who are controlling the whole nature. These
maniacs.
They are people, and these people, if we can't stop them, if we don't stop them somehow, imagine that they can win a war with these enormous machines of war that can destroy the genetic damage of the human race, that can wipe out Mother Nature in one explosion.
Yeah.
So, well, what I say is this, is that the way they will do this, and it's almost certainly the way they will do this, because he describes this is the way that he thinks the Russians are going to do it in Latvia, is he's going to do what happened
CIA plan.
He's going to CIA his way in here. He's bringing in fifth columnists who will destabilise the political situation here and set the Russians against the Latvians and the Latvian nationalists against the Russians. And then this will get out of control, probably in some eastern area where there are lots of Russians, like Daugavpils, and he will try to provoke the president, the Kremlin into dealing with it in some way, just as was done in the Ukraine. And so here in Latvia, and Latvia has always been throughout history, there was a very famous Prussian general who said that the purpose of Latvia is to be the battleground for other countries. This is a direct translation of a German statement by this general.
Can I please introduce you? There is a sideway around Latvia. Just explain it. There's a sideway around Latvia.
No.
Which they can battle about. Where there are no inhabitants.
No, well, yes, I know, but that's not the point. I'm just saying what the German said. He said that, that the purpose of Latvia is to be the battleground. And what I'm saying is that this is still the case. This is still the case now, because historically, because it's such a strategic country, and it has the huge river, and it has the port, and it has now, which is why it was invaded by the Russians, of course, who kicked the Germans out, and why it was made into the Russian base, because of all these historical developments, these historical reasons. It is now somewhere where the CIA or the people who control the world, whoever you like to call them, some people think the Zionists, some people say parts of the American defense industry people, you know, who want to make money making missiles and all that stuff. You know, there are lots of targets, there are lots of people you can say, but we don't care who they are, because whoever they have systematically since the 1950s caused wars to occur in various countries around the world by infiltrating people and causing political changes to occur. Now, the most important political thing that will occur here will be like Latvian against Russian, and the answer to that, what you must do, what the Latvian government must do, and I'm talking to you, Latvian government, is that you can head this off by issuing passports to all of the Russian people living here. And that's in any case that is that's European Union law. They have to have passports. If they're citizens of the country, they have to have passports. You have to give them passports. Now, even if they don't want them, even if they say, well, look, well, I'm Russian, I don't want your passport, you issue them with a passport. That means that the people who come in here and infiltrate and try to cause trouble over this business, that the Russians are somehow second-class citizens, which is what he says in this book, but from the opposite direction. And that's how that's what he says, is that the Russians are going to do this. They're going to send their infiltrators into Daugavpils to say, hey, you haven't got passports, you've got to kick up a fuss about it. But it will be the other way around. And it might even be CIA people pretending to be Russians coming in and saying all that.
And issue them passports too.
Yeah, so this is the answer. And issue me a passport while you're at it. But that's what I do say, is that if you want to, the cleverest way to head off this possible thing, and we're talking about the end of the world, right? And we're talking about probably the most important nation in the world now with regard to the possibility of nuclear war and the end of the world, Latvia, where I happen to be by a series of peculiar accidents. And I'm hoping that, you know, standing here in this hall and talking to you from Riga, I can somehow influence some people to realise the dangers that we are all in. Dangers of the destruction of civilization as a result of madmen who run 8 miles every morning and eat vegan meals. Thank you.
And plan the Third World War. Yeah. Thanks so much, Christopher. Anyway, I will calm you down as Kona of Indigenous People of Latvia and the Baltic Sea region. I will criminalize nuclear war systems, and it is indeed not the passport giving that is the main trouble. The thing that is the main trouble is that both Russia and each Europe state and 170 states of the world have central banks run by Federal Reserve Bank that is waging their Third World War. They have been established in 1913, and this is their Third World War, after which they have the New World Order.
Well, there won't be
that
much
they
left
run.
at one point. There won't be anything left for them to have a New World Order over.
Yeah. So I do not consider that giving passports to some people will stop the world war. The very interesting thing here is that both Central Bank of Russia and Central Bank of Latvia and Central Bank of United Kingdom and United States are all run by BIS.org in Switzerland.
Well, I'm not getting involved in arguing about that. I see the world differently from you.
Yeah, but let's get it into perspective.
Well,
here.
you can tell the people that, but I don't go on with that.
Anyway, this is my kind of story, and I am indigenous of Latvia, the most important place in the world right now. And this is what I tell to the world.
Oh, there you go.
And
I'm just saying,
it is very hard to convince even Christopher that this method would not stop the world war. And the method that I do rule for is that we here in Latvia, in the most important place of the world to stop the Third World War, establish indigenous reserve bank of the world. So if we right now have Federal Reserve Bank of the United States ruling the world's currency with their occult black magic dollar, with Satan's eye in the dollar bill, now we will create the money that is called Baltic Indigenous Runes, divine money connected to the higher forces of light, peace, love and understanding. And we criminalize all wars and all the people that are planning this war. We criminalize their corporations. And these people can go on vacation. We can grant them salaries. We can emit Baltic indigenous runes to these people who are not well, really. They are planning to mass murder the planet. And we will grant them rehab. We will love them. We will cherish them.
I don't love them, I lock them up.
Yeah, but that is why I'm telling this other story, you know. This is our indigenous solution. We will give them rehabilitation where they at last can be peace. Because having military professions is damaging their souls. While they are maniacs, why they are psychopathic military order planning world war. Because they are in a criminal system and they need rehab. And we will provide it. So there is a solution. And here, with love from Latvia, we do criminalize nuclear war systems. Let it be so.